Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
It is Friday, and all of our guests today, including Thomas Drance, standing by, are brought to you by the Waddling Dog Pub. One of Victoria's historic watering holes welcomes you to come see why they are the talk of the peninsula. The Dog is the place to be for all NFL playoff action, including a big game party February 12th, Sunday. Also swing by their attached liquor store to pick up your Donnie and Dolly swag. There are countless reasons to come, sit, and stay at the Waddling Dog. Canucks beat the Islanders 6-5 just before we get to Thomas. Delaney's OK Tire and Langley inbox. G in Richmond texting in. Rick?
Yep.
Coffee and Bailey's tomorrow.
Coffee.
There.
No.
There you go.
I have a rule, 12 o'clock, high noon, nothing.
You mean nothing before?
Nothing before high noon.
But maybe you make an exception because that 9 o'clock start is so
rules.
unusual.
Once you turn 50, Donnie, strict rules apply.
Hey, I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of people who agree with G in Richmond, although I prefer the cheaper Carol Ann's Irish cream. I think it's like $1 less a bottle. Thomas Drance joins us from The Athletic in the wake of the Canuck victory over the Islanders in Elmont, New York. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Not a sponsored comment that I'm about to make, but you got to try Wayne Gretzky's Irish cream.
Oh, really?
Trust me. Yeah. And high noon, man, that's a ridiculous rule, by the way.
That's
Dolly.
my rule.
I know.
That's
I
my
think your
rule.
rule's the talk of the peninsula.
Under 50. Hey, Thomas, under 50 and over 50. Things change, my friend.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
Okay. All right. 3-2-1 under Rick Tocchet for the Canucks, Thomas. Are there obvious differences that you're seeing?
Not systematically yet. And I mean, you know, it's not as if this team's become robust defensively or something, right? They allowed 14 goals across 3 games in New York. This team should be, even without Bo Horvat, a lot better than they've been over the first part of the year. I mean, you look at the rosters that they're hanging around with, your Montreals, your San Jose's. I mean, this team has real NHL players, like star-level NHL players on it relative to those clubs. There's no reason for the Canucks to have been as poor as they've been to this point in the season. We should expect them to do exactly this over the balance, which is perform at a far higher rate. You know, I've always sort of thought this team would finish in the low 80s in terms of point totals. The schedule is going to get really easy in March and April, one of the weakest in the league. And yeah, I mean, they're pretenders in the tank battle. There's no question about it. And more than anything, I think we're seeing reversion to the mean. I am seeing some things differently, though, right? I mean, obviously, we're seeing Andrei Kuzmenko play a lot less. A lot less. The Canucks also, you know, one thing that's interesting about getting a new coach in is watching him figure some things out, right? And you know, they'll start with their preconceived notions, and then they'll figure things out as they go. Elevating Brock Besser stands out, but here's one that really stood out to me yesterday. And granted, the club's on the road, so you have to take some of this with a grain of salt. Some of it's beyond Tocchet's control. But really, it was the Pettersson line out for the majority of Vancouver's 5-on-5 minutes against Bo Horvat and Matt Barzal. You'll remember when this team started under Tocchet in those home games, Chicago and Columbus, it was really the Pettersson line in sort of a third line matchup with Tocchet talking about how much he wanted to try and earn that line minutes against bottom end competition. They were clearly the line that he was certainly comfortable with battling in a hard match yesterday. And what did that mean? That meant JT Miller played third line comp and had a really good game. That might be a better situation for him, particularly if the club is intent on keeping him at center.
What doesn't Rick Tocchet like about Andrei Kuzmenko right now?
Well, you know, first of all, he had a bad game against the Rangers. I don't know that I saw as much that was poor against the Islanders. He had that one spin pass that Beauvillier could have put away if not for a quick stick from an Islanders defender. But he wasn't super noticeable. You know, I think there have been defensive flaws in his game that the team has lived with over the course of this season. I don't think that's a huge surprise given his lack of NHL experience. And, you know, I think what's probably happened more than anything is that this is more a Brock Besser story than it is an Andrei Kuzmenko story, right? There's you go watch the tape from that New Jersey Devils game, and Brock Besser's work on the forecheck in particular was standout, right? He's really strong on the wall. He's a really smart overall player. He's probably not a line driver on his own, but he can be productive, and he's smart enough to be responsible defensively. You can understand why that would appeal to Tocchet, particularly in a world where he's beginning to suspect that Pettersson playing in toughs might be his best way forward. That to me is sort of the story here. Kuzmenko's situation, obviously very interesting. Club traded its highest minutes forward, which, removes him from consideration for like ice time bonuses from Kuzmenko's entry-level contract perspective. Limiting his minutes, particularly after extending him, could actually have some cap benefit to the Canucks, depending on how this all plays out. Particularly since they're in LTI and will have overage bonuses applied for all bonuses that Kuzmenko hits. He's already hit his goals once. So, I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but they are going to have to, particularly in the wake of the commitment that they gave him, continue to feature him significantly in an offensive role. All of that said, this is the risk you take when you change coaches, right? You change coaches, and a guy who, think about Höglander from Travis Green to Bruce Boudreau. Right? Yeah. A guy who looked like he had tons of value all of a sudden finds himself on the outside looking in because of how a coach rates various players. They all do it a little bit differently. There's always a guy or two whose value is going to sink massively when you make a coaching change. One hopes that it's not Kuzmenko, particularly given how recently the club decided to extend him.
Okay, Thomas, look ahead to the trade deadline 3 weeks today. We still got Shen, Demko, Besser, a host of other guys.
Some storylines, yeah.
Yeah, how do you see it shaking down here in Vancouver with the trade deadline now around the corner?
It's tough to gauge because I think it's going to be really hard to move money out, right? The Tarasenko trade, I think, illustrates that pretty effectively, where the St. Louis Blues had to retain half, $3.75 million in salary prorated in order to facilitate that trade. In a world where a cup-winning 30 points in 39 games winger like Tarasenko requires that level of retention. Moving a distressed asset or a relatively distressed asset with term remaining, I think is going to be really tricky, right? I mean, the Tarasenko return's probably good news for like Mike Greer and Kyle Davidson holding Pat Kane and Timo Meier, because it implies that the market for wingers is bouncing back, but like ellipsis ... provided that they're on an expiring term, right? You're seeing and hearing about teams like the Minnesota Wild that aren't interested in taking on years, but will try and make things work for a higher salary guy on an expiring deal, like a James Van Riemsdyk. This is sort of the dynamic at play here. So I think moving off of a Garland or a Besser, something the Canucks would obviously be motivated to do, I think that's going to be really tricky unless they consider taking bad money back. The Demko situation, we'll see. I think it's a fool's errand to try and handicap which way that one goes, particularly before he returns to action. And then Luke Shen, I mean, this one, like, you have to be a child to think that the Canucks shouldn't trade him. Like, truly, it's an immature take. It's an unserious take. It's one that would, I think, throw this organization's understanding of what it takes to winning and commitment to actually winning into serious question. So, I expect him to stay.
Well, hey, don't rule it out. I'll tell you that much right now. Pettersson, right now, we wake up this morning, third in the NHL, 5-on-5 scoring, ninth in the NHL in scoring.
Pretty good.
And Thomas, I got to figure his agent, J.P. Barry's licking his chops, because if they would have done the long-term deal like they were supposed to, but they didn't have cap space because of the previous regime, they wouldn't be having to redo his deal in a year and a half.
Hey, well, when you can sign Jason Dickinson for 3 years and acquire Oliver Ekman-Larsson, why would you go long on Elias Pettersson?
Yep.
Look, that's a tough one. I'm not going to lie. Part of the worst, or one of the worst things about it is that, it was Pettersson's agents. It was Pettersson himself who wanted more term.
They all did.
Like, it was the Canucks looking for the bridge.
They were all looking for term. JP came on our show and says, we want long term. Now they're going to pay the price. Thomas, they're going to pay the price.
Well, I know. This is the risk you take going short on elite players.
That's it.
And here's the worst part about it, right? Like, there is a world where it makes sense to go short on elite players when you're absolutely, dead smack dab in the middle of the mix, right? Like you look at Tampa Bay Lightning, right? They made the Cup Finals all 3 years of Braden Point's bridge. No one's criticizing them for saving a couple million in those seasons, right? That's the difference between having Blake Coleman and Yan Gord and Barclay Goodrow and not. But, I mean, what are the Canucks going to get in terms of value from Pettersson's bridge contract? 2 years, 2 of the first 3 years, they've missed the playoffs. Like, the third year, they're probably not going to be very good. So it's extraordinarily short-sighted, and the bill's going to come due for it. If Pettersson keeps this up for another year, if the cap goes up at the same time, I think there's a world where we get into, valuations that are at the very top of the league, if not sort of above it, right? Like, absolutely. I think we could get there if Pettersson, is 95 plus points both of the next 2 seasons and doesn't sign an extension early. This is one of those things where the Canucks have, in part fundamentally compromised their ability to build an efficient team around this core group as a result of, not just the moves that they made, but also the way that they approach these contracts. It's extraordinarily damaging. I don't think there's any way to fix it. And that's sort of more fuel for the fire in terms of my checklist, right? Like I often go down a checklist. Weak prospect system, no cap space, not good now, no cost certainty with your best players. Like, that's the checklist. And the checklist sort of draw the line at the bottom and do the math.
No checks.
And it points to a rebuild. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no checks. It's just it's time to start again if you can't rely on any of those things, which, Rutherford and Alvin inherited a situation where they couldn't. And I don't know that they've hatched a plan to really fix it.
I'm looking on the interweb here. This Wayne Gretzky cream whiskey, which I've never heard of. 5 stars across the board, out of stock on several websites. You're onto something here.
Donnie, it's unbelievable. So my wife's family anyway, lives in the Niagara Peninsula. We always go back for Christmas, and we got bottles on bottles of that during the holidays. It's unbelievable. Now, the great one, also making great Irish cream.
So we know where we're going for Super Bowl. Bottles of Wayne Gretzky Irish cream, or Canadian cream, they call it. Thomas, thanks so much for this, my friend.
Enjoy your weekend, boys, and let's go Chiefs. Let's go.
Are you picking them? They're not favored.
I'm picking the Eagles now for sure.
I'm picking the Eagles first half money line, Chiefs game money line. Ooh. And that's 7-1. That's 7-1 at whatever gambling partner you would like to plug. So
bet99.net. Bet99.net.
Bet99.net. Let's go.
Bet on bet99.net while drinking Gretzky's Irish cream at home, or Canadian cream. Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate it.
Cheers, boys.